In today's Tale of Two Tones, I'm going to do my very best to pay some tribute to one of the greatest rock and metal guitar players of all time, Mr. Randy Rhoads. Hey folks, Jack here from Peach Guitars, and as I said in the introduction, it's fairly obvious what I'm going to do today, but I want to do this with a little bit of a different angle to what we've done before. In previous episodes of this series, I've tried to kind of give a roundabout approximation of the kind of headspace of different guitar players that we focused on and what led them to make the tonal choices that they made. However, in the case of Randy Rhoads, I think it's such a shame that his career was so short, and therefore the tones that he had, I think it's worth paying a bit more direct attention to. So I want to try and get as close as I can with the means that I have here with the stock that we have in the shop. I want to reference this album, which for me, as a guitar player anyway, when I was a lot younger, this was one of the absolute Bibles that I had for guitar. If you haven't heard this, and you want to get the vibe of Randy Rhoads to the full, this is the way to go. And the tones I'm going to try and go for in today's video are largely based around this magnificent album. The stuff that he did achieve in that incredibly short 2-year space of time with Ozzy is some of the most remarkable rock and metal guitar playing ever, and it's something that provided a huge template for basically every metal guitarist that came after that point. Certainly all the guitarists that Ozzy has played with since pay maximum reverence and reference to the great work that Randy did on those first 2 albums and on this live record I talked about. So what made it so special? In my opinion, it's the architecture of the guitar playing. He wasn't just a kind of full-on rock guitar player. The way Randy did things was a little bit more, I think, reserved. And not necessarily when it came to his live guitar playing, but on the record he was so intent on building up the structure of the songs, layering guitars upon guitars upon guitars, really structuring things out very cleverly. So much so that there is no way to properly replicate those sounds because they are crafted to perfection in the studio. And that, I think, allowed him to have this very anthemic, this very kind of rich and multi-layered sound. And I don't think any guitar players really got the same level of that kind of detail. I get a bit of a Brian May sensibility out of him as well, and I think Brian May is another guitar player that has that same touch and that same approach to guitar. His lead lines are very similar, very kind of, I don't know, there's no other way to put it other than melodic, and despite how fiercely shreddable Randy's playing was at times, he always had a very cool melody to it. But I want to delve into the tones a little bit more, and there's very few guitar players in history that have had, particularly those with such a short career, such an iconic image that comes to mind when you think of their gear. So with Randy Rhoads, it's all about the white 74 Les Paul Custom, the white, what would become Jackson V, or the Rhoads shape, and that cool black and white polka dot. I think it was Carl Sandoval made the guitar. Those three, those are the trifecta of Randy Rhoads' signature tone. I've got this modern day Gibson Custom Shop, just straight off the shelf Les Paul Custom. There's nothing special about this one in particular, it's not a reissue. We have had the 74 reissues in the past, which really nail that vibe and that sound, but this does an equally great job. This has got the 400 series pickups in there, so they're quite high output. But with the Les Paul, it's all about the heft, and it's actually quite a bright guitar rig, quite a bright sound. I'm going to come on to the other components in the chain that make that happen, but all the chunk and the heft of a Les Paul is very important, and he did all the great tricks with the kill switch by turning off the neck volume and using the pickup selector switch to get that happening. I also like the kind of level of pinch harmonics that he got out of this guitar, and that again just paved the way for, you know, certain other Les Paul playing guitar players that played with Ozzy, I would say, a little later down the line. A lot of influence came from this guitar setup. Right, so I'll just walk through quickly the rest of the signal chain so you get a bit of context. I've gone basically as close to Randy's pedal board and amp setup as I could. So let me just spend a couple of minutes talking about that. I've got the MXR Custom Shop Distortion Plus reissue. I've also got the MXR 10-band EQ, which I'm mainly using just for a bit of a lead boost here and there, but I'm going to use it with the V as well, the Jackson guitar, just to shape the EQ a little bit. Chorus was another big thing. I'm just using the MXR analog chorus today. Got the Echoplex preamp from MXR as well. I believe Randy used a couple of different delay units, particularly live, but I always love the tone of the preamp section of those units, so I'm using the standalone Echoplex pedal for that. One of the most important things to try and get the double tracking or triple tracking nature of his studio tones is to use, I think, a very, very short delay. So I've got right at the end of the chain an MXR carbon copy with no regeneration, no delay time, but it's on. It's kind of like a slight chorusing effect without being an overt chorus. And I'm using that as best as I can to try and get some of that double tracking nature, though I've only got one amp. Speaking of, this is one of the very best Marshall interpretations that we could possibly have got our hands on. This is the Dr. Z EMS. And this is basically, as the name implies, every Marshall sound. At least that's what I think it stands for. Randy's amps were very unique and interesting. He had that really cool white Marshall, which is actually a signature product, but couldn't get my hands on one of those today. And it was one of the first examples of using cascaded gain. And so he took his amps to the Marshall factory, had them modded, knew exactly what he wanted to get out of those amps, and he did it. And it was such a fundamental part of the sound. Though I think the EMS does a really good job of getting close to that vibe, particularly with the Distortion Plus in the front end, just to give it a little bit of a boost, and that's the most important thing. Oh, and volume. That's very, very important to this sound. It's just got to be loud, it's got to be raucous. And as I said when I was talking about this album, I learned a lot about rock guitar playing just from listening to that. The slight little hints of feedback that would come in if you ring a note out for a millisecond too long, that's part of the magic, and that's what I wanted to try and replicate here today. Something I wanted to do is drop in a little bit of a reference to a previous Ozzy track, a Black Sabbath track that Randy played on this live record. So it's interesting just to hear the totally different approaches of Children of the Grave, both in this video, the way Randy played it live, and you can go back and listen to the Tony version, the original version, in the Tony Iommi video, which is linked below. And it's just interesting to hear the huge differences therein. Okay, so guitar number 2. I guess this is another one of those kind of tale of two guitars episodes here today. As I said before, Randy was known to use pretty much in equal measure his Gibson Les Paul and his custom-made Vs, more specifically the Jackson V that came about a little later on, I think maybe in time for the second album, and it was certainly on this live tribute record. So when he was playing this guitar, obviously this afforded him more options. I think there was a lot of carryover from the Gibson, so the Polka Dot V, for example, had the two, I think they were DiMarzio pickups with the 4 controls, so similar to a Les Paul. The Jackson, though, was a little bit more Jackson through and through, so it's just got one volume, one tone, a pair of Seymour Duncan pickups, and it birthed an entire line of guitars for Jackson later on. This is the Rhoads RR3 model, which is a brilliant guitar. I think it really gets it just packs that vibe in. It's got a really nice satin neck on this, so it's very comfortable. It's got the locking Floyd Rose system, but most crucially, it's got Seymour Duncan humbuckers, which I think are crucial to the sound that this guitar gave Randy. It's a little bit clearer, it's a little bit brighter. It doesn't have as much lower mid that the Les Paul has, so I'm using the MXR EQ to accentuate that a little bit actually and make this even more cutting. Whenever you use this, you can kind of hear it, that there's obviously when he's using the tremolo you can hear that, but the tone is different and it just works in a really nice way. I think it paved the way for a lot of 80s guitar players going forward that were into that high gain sound. folks, so that is it for today's Tale of Two Tones. I hope you've enjoyed it. It was certainly a lot of fun for me to do and to try and revisit some of that magic that I found early on with that live tribute record. If you haven't heard it, I really suggest that you do check it out. I think we got pretty close to the tones with the gear that's here, so if you want to find out any more information about any of this stuff I've used, it's all linked in the description below. You can go to the website and check it out for yourself. Luckily, it's quite easy to grab this stuff. There's nothing too boutique, nothing too niche here. That's what I really like. It's just straight ahead, balls out, rock and metal guitar playing. And that's the most important thing to copying those early Ozzy tones. So if you've enjoyed today's video, folks, please do us a favour, leave a like down below, comment down below with your thoughts, and if you're a Randy fan, I'd like to know what Randy's playing meant to you down in the comments. And please make sure as well that you are subscribed to the Peach Guitars and to the Peach Boutique channel so you don't miss out on any of the content that we're putting out at any point.